Hello, this video is a short introduction to the lesson Nightmare by Malcolm X, which has been prescribed for the third semester undergraduate students as a part of the Common Course English. Now, Nightmare is an excerpt which has been taken from Malcolm X's autobiography, which is titled as The Autobiography of Malcolm X. In this autobiography, in this particular excerpt which has been taken from the autobiography, he talks about the devastating effects of racism that he and his family had to endure in the hands of the white supremacist organizations. So today I'll be talking about two things. I'll be talking about racism in general, and also I'll be introducing three of the most important characters in this particular excerpt. What is racism? Racism is a word not with a very pleasant meaning. It is basically the manner in which a person or a group of people are viewed either as superior or inferior based on their ethnicity, their race, or their skin tone, the color of their skin. And racism almost always involves discrimination, the ill treatment of the people who are considered to be inferior. I'll be talking about racism in the context of America, which is the primary focus of this particular lesson, Nightmare. Now, we all know that the Africans were brought in as slaves to America to work on the plantations. And because the Africans belonged to a different race, and because they had a different ethnic background, and also because their skin color was a little different from the white people, we see that the whites always tended to treat the Africans as inferior. They saw the Negroes as a step below them. And therefore, I talk to you about this because this forms a very, very important aspect of the Nightmare. And they were treated often with contempt by the Americans. We know that the Emancipation Proclamation that was declared when Abraham Lincoln was the President of America abolished slavery. Slavery was made illegal, and the whole idea and the whole process of slave trade was put to an end. But however, in spite of this, racism still continued to exist. Why? Because most of the Africans, they did not go back to their homeland because they just wished to stay back in America because most of their ancestors were, they had lived in America for such a long time. And because of this, we see that most of the Africans, in fact, almost everyone who stayed back, even now we see problems of racism happening in the United States. Most of them were discriminated against and they were denied equal opportunities. Now, it is in this context that Malcolm X actually writes this autobiography and this excerpt, which has been taken from there, which is Nightmare. Now, going on to the second part of my introduction today, I would like to introduce three most important characters in the Nightmare. The first one is the author himself, Malcolm X. Now, he was actually born as Malcolm Little, and he was born at Omaha, Nebraska. He was a minister, a human rights activist, and he was a prominent black nationalist leader. He was a spokesman for what is called as the Nation of Islam between 1950 and 1960. Now, Nation of Islam, it was an African movement that combined elements of Islam and black nationalist ideas. Now, we understand from his excerpt from The Nightmare that Malcolm X was a brilliant student, but however, he dropped out of school, and at a later point in his life, he was sent to prison as a part of a burglary conviction. And it was in prison that he met a person called Elijah Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, who was a leader of the Nation of Islam, and it is because of Elijah Muhammad's influence that we see that Malcolm X joins this organization, and he becomes a great proponent of this organization too. And we see that the Nation of Islam grew as a part of Malcolm X's efforts from the very meager number of members that they had to a very huge number. But unfortunately, we see that Malcolm X was assassinated by 3 members of the Nation of Islam when he withdrew from the organization. The next person I would like to introduce to you is Reverend Earl Little, Malcolm X's father. He was from Reynolds, Georgia, and he was a Baptist minister and a follower of Marcus Garvey and a member of Garvey's organization, UNIA. So he was a follower of Marcus Garvey and a follower of his organization, UNIA, which is Universal Negro Improvement Association. Earl Little was an ardent supporter of Marcus Garvey, and he believed in the freedom, the self-respect of the Negroes, and he exhorted the Africans to go back to their homeland, that is in Africa. And an interesting factor is that Earl Little loved Malcolm X more than his other children, and Malcolm X tells us in his excerpt this is because Malcolm X had a very light skin color. Now the next person I would like to introduce to you is Malcolm X's mother, Lois Little. Lois Little was born in Grenada, and she looked like a white woman because her father was a white man. Lois Little had an accent which did not sound like a Negro's. In fact, she sounded like any of the other white Americans. And she had never seen her father. In fact, she never really wanted to see her father. And we understand that she detested her skin color, and she detested this fact in Malcolm X too. And therefore, she was a little too harsh with Malcolm X than she was with the other children. And this is where we see the irony. Earl Little loving Malcolm X more because he was white in color, and Lois Little not being very happy about this matter. And Malcolm X tells us about the trials and tribulations that Lois Little had to face after Earl's death in order to raise her children up. And he talks about her with a lot of love and respect. We will learn more about these characters in detail as we go into an analysis of the text Nightmare, the trials and the tribulations that they faced because they were Negroes and because they lived in a white land. And this will be done in the next class. Thank you so much.